2 Maccabees, chapter 14, verse 18 through chapter 15, verse 39. Nevertheless, Nicanor, hearing of the manliness of them that were with Judas, and the courageousness that they had to fight for their country, durst not try the matter by the sword. Wherefore he sent Posidonius, and Theodotus, and Mattathias to make peace. So when they had taken long advisement thereupon, and the captain had made the multitude acquainted therewith, and it appeared that they were all of one mind, they consented to the covenants, and appointed a day to meeting together by themselves. And when the day came, and stools were set for either of them, Judas placed armed men ready in convenient places, lest some treachery should be suddenly practiced by the enemies. So they made a peaceable conference. And Nicanor abode in Jerusalem, and did no hurt, but sent away the people that came flocking unto him. And he would not willingly have Judas out of his sight, for he loved the man from his heart. He prayed him also to take a wife, and to beget children. So he married, was quiet, and took part of this life. But Alcimus, perceiving the love that was betwixt them, and considering the covenants that were made, came to Demetrius, and told him that Nicanor was not well affected toward the state, for that he had ordained Judas, a traitor to his realm, to be the king's successor. Then the king, being enraged, and provoked with the accusations of the most wicked man, wrote to Nicanor, signifying that he was much displeased with the covenants, and commanding him that he should send Maccabees prisoner in all haste unto Antioch. When this came to Nicanor's hearing, he was much confounded in himself, and took it grievously, that he should make void the articles which were agreed upon, and the man being in no fault. But because there was no dealing against the king, he watched his time to accomplish this thing by policy. Notwithstanding, when Maccabees saw that Nicanor began to be churlish unto him, and that he entreated him more roughly than he was wont, perceiving that such sour behavior came not of good, he gathered together not a few of his men, and withdrew himself from Nicanor. But the other, knowing that he was notably prevented by Judas's policy, came into the great and holy temple, and commanded the priests that were offering their usual sacrifices to deliver him the man. And when they sware that they could not tell where the man was whom he sought, he stretched out his right hand toward the temple, and made an oath in this manner: If ye will not deliver me Judas as a prisoner, I will lay this temple of God even with the ground, and I will break down the altar, and erect a notable temple unto Bacchus. After these words he departed. Then the priests lifted up their hands toward heaven, and besought him that was ever a defender of their nation, saying in this manner: Thou, O Lord of all things, who hast need of nothing, wast pleased that the temple of thine habitation should be among us. Therefore now, O holy Lord of all holiness, keep this house ever undefiled, which lately was cleansed, and stop every unrighteous mouth. Now was there accused unto Nicanor one Razus, one of the elders of Jerusalem, a lover of his countrymen, and a man of very good report, who for his kindness was called the father of the Jews. From the former time, when they mingled not themselves with the Gentiles, he had been accused of Judaism, and did boldly jeopard his body and life with all vehemency for the religion of the Jews. So Nicanor, willing to declare the hate that he bare unto the Jews, sent above 500 men of war to take him, for he thought by taking him to do the Jews much hurt. Now, when the multitude would have taken the tower, and violently broken into the outer door, and bade that fire should be brought to burn it, he, being ready to be taken on every side, fell upon his sword, choosing rather to die manfully than to come into the hands of the wicked, to be abused otherwise than beseemed his noble birth. But missing his stroke through haste, the multitude also rushing within the doors, he ran boldly up to the wall, and cast himself down manfully among the thickest of them. But they quickly giving back, and a space being made, he fell down into the midst of the void place. Nevertheless, while there was yet breath within him, being inflamed with anger, he rose up, and though his blood gushed out like spouts of water, and his wounds were grievous, yet he ran through the midst of the throng, and standing upon a steep rock, when as his blood was now quite gone, he plucked out his bowels, and taking them in both his hands, he cast them upon the throng, and calling upon the Lord of life and spirit to restore him those again, he thus died. But Nicanor, hearing that Judas and his company were in the strong places about Samaria, resolved without any danger to set upon them on the Sabbath day. Nevertheless, the Jews that were compelled to go with him said, O destroy not so cruelly and barbarously, but give honor to that day, which he, that seeth all things, hath honored with holiness above other days. Then the most ungracious wretch demanded, if there were a mighty one in heaven, that had commanded the Sabbath day to be kept. And when they said, There is in heaven a living Lord, and mighty, who commanded the seventh day to be kept, then said the other, And I also am mighty upon the earth, and I command to take arms, and to do the king's business. Yet he obtained not to have his wicked will done. So Nicanor, in exceeding pride and haughtiness, determined to set up a public monument of his victory over Judas and them that were with him. But Maccabees had ever sure confidence that the Lord would help him. Wherefore he exhorted his people not to fear the coming of the heathen against them, but to remember the help which in former times they had received from heaven, and now to expect the victory and aid which should come unto them from the Almighty. And so comforting them out of the law and the prophets, and withal putting them in mind of the battles that they had won afore, he made them more cheerful. And when he had stirred up their minds, he gave them their charge, showing them therewithal the falsehood of the heathen, and the breach of oaths. Thus he armed every one of them, not so much with defensive shields and spears, as with comfortable and good words. And beside that, he told them a dream worthy to be believed, as if it had been so indeed, which did not a little rejoice them. And this was his vision, that Onias, who had been high priest, a virtuous and a good man, reverend in conversation, gentle in condition, well spoken also, and exercised from a child in all points of virtue, holding up his hands, prayed for the whole body of the Jews. This done, in like manner, there appeared a man with gray hairs, and exceeding glorious, who was of a wonderful and excellent majesty. Then Onias answered, saying, This is a lover of the brethren, who prayeth much for the people, and for the holy city, to wit, Jeremias the prophet of God. Whereupon Jeremias, holding forth his right hand, gave to Judas a sword of gold, and in giving it spake thus, Take this holy sword, a gift from God, with the which thou shalt wound the adversaries. Thus being well comforted by the words of Judas, which were very good, and able to stir them up to valor, and to encourage the hearts of the young men, they determined not to pitch camp, but courageously to set upon them, and manfully tried the matter by conflict, because the city and sanctuary and the temple were in danger. For the care that they took for their wives and their children, their brethren and kinsfolks, was in least account with them, but the greatest and principal fear was for the holy temple. Also, they that were in the city took not the least care, being troubled for the conflict abroad. And now, when as all looked what should be the trial, and the enemies were already come near, and the army was set in array, and the beasts conveniently placed, and the horsemen set in wings, Maccabees, seeing the coming of the multitude, and diverse preparations of armor, and the fierceness of the beasts, stretched out his hands toward heaven, and called upon the Lord that worketh wonders, knowing that victory cometh not by arms, but even as it seemeth good to him. He giveth it to such as are worthy. Therefore, in his prayer, he said after this manner, O Lord, thou didst send thine angel in the time of Ezekias, king of Judea, and didst slay in the host of Sennacherib 185,000. Wherefore now also, O Lord of heaven, send a good angel before us, for a fear and dread unto them. And through the might of thine arm, let those be stricken with terror, that come against thy holy people to blaspheme. And he ended thus. Then Nicanor and they that were with him came forward with trumpets and songs. But Judas and his company encountered the enemies with invocation and prayer. So that fighting with their hands, and praying unto God with their hearts, they slew no less than 35,000 men, for through the appearance of God they were greatly cheered. Now when the battle was done, returning again with joy, they knew that Nicanor lay dead in his harness. Then they made a great shout and noise, praising the Almighty in their own language. And Judas, who was ever the chief defender of the citizens, both in body and mind, and who continued his love toward his countrymen all his life, commanded to strike off Nicanor's head, and his hand with his shoulder, and bring them to Jerusalem. So when he was there, and had called them of his nation together, and set the priests before the altar, he sent for them that were of the tower, and showed them vile Nicanor's head, and the head of that blasphemer, which the proud brags he had stretched out against the holy temple of the Almighty. And when he had cut out the tongue of that ungodly Nicanor, he commanded they should give it by pieces unto the fowls, and hang up the reward of his madness before the temple. So every man praised toward the heaven the glorious Lord, saying, Blessed be he that hath kept his own place undefiled. He hanged also Nicanor's head upon the tower, an evident and manifest sign unto all of the help of the Lord. And they ordained all with a common decree, in no case to let that day pass without solemnity, but to celebrate the 13th day of the 12th month, which in the Syrian tongue is called Adar, the day before Mardocheus' day. Thus went it with Nicanor, and from that time forth the Hebrews had the city in their power. And here will I make an end. And if I have done well, and as is fitting the story, it is that which I desired, but if slenderly and meanly, it is that which I could attain unto. For as it is hurtful to drink wine or water alone, and as wine mingled with water is pleasant, and delighteth the taste, even so speech finely framed delighteth the ears of them that read the story. And here shall be an end. 2 Esdras, chapter 8. And he answered me, saying, The Most High hath made this world for many, but the world to come for few. I will tell thee a similitude, Esdras. As when thou askest the earth, it shall say unto thee, that it giveth much mold whereof earthen vessels are made, but little dust that gold cometh of. Even so is the course of this present world. There be many created, but few shall be saved. So answered I and said, Swallow then down, O my soul, understanding, and devour wisdom. For thou hast agreed to give ear, and art willing to prophesy, for thou hast no longer space than only to live. O Lord, if thou suffer not thy servant, that we may pray before thee, and thou give us seed unto our heart, and culture to our understanding, that there may come fruit of it, how shall each man live that is corrupt, who weareth the place of a man? For thou art alone, and we all one workmanship of thine hands, like as thou hast said. For when the body is fashioned now in the mother's womb, and thou givest it members, thy creature is preserved in fire and water, and 9 months doth thy workmanship endure thy creature, which is created in her. But that which keepeth and is kept shall both be preserved, and when the time cometh, the one preserved delivereth up the things that grew in it. For thou hast commanded out of the parts of the body, that is to say, out of the breasts, milk to be given, which is the fruit of the breasts, that the thing which is fashioned may be nourished for a time, till thou disposest it to thy mercy. Thou broughtest it up with thy righteousness, and nurturedst in thy law, and reformedst it with thy judgment. And thou shalt mortify it as thy creature, and quicken it as thy work. If therefore thou shalt destroy him which with so great labor was fashioned, it is an easy thing to be ordained by the commandment, that thing which was made might be preserved. Now therefore, Lord, I will speak, touching men in general. Thou knowest best, but touching thy people, for whose sake I am sorry. And for thine inheritance, for whose cause I mourn, and for Israel, for whom I am heavy, and for Jacob, for whose sake I am troubled. Therefore will I begin to pray before thee for myself and for them, for I see the falls of us to dwell in the land. But I have heard the swiftness of the judge which is to come. Therefore, hear my voice, and understand my words, and I shall speak before thee. This is the beginning of the words of Esdras, before he was taken up. And I said, O Lord, thou that dwellest in everlastingness, which beholdest from above things in the heaven and in the air, whose throne is inestimable, whose glory may not be comprehended, before whom the host of angels stand trembling, whose service is conversant in wind and fire, whose word is true, and sayings constant, whose commandment is strong, and ordinance fearful, whose look drieth up the depths, and indignation maketh the mountains to melt away, which the truth witnesseth. O hear the prayer of thy servant, and give ear to the petition of thy creature. For while I live I will speak, and so long as I have understanding I will answer. O look not upon the sins of thy people, but on them which serve thee in truth. Regard not the wicked inventions of the heathen, but the desire of those that keep thy testimonies and afflictions. Think not upon those that have walked feignedly before thee, but remember them, which according to thy will have known thy fear. Let it not be thy will to destroy them which have lived like beasts, but to look upon them that have clearly taught thy law. Take thou no indignation at them which are deemed worse than beasts, but love them that always put their trust in thy righteousness and glory. For we and our fathers do languish of such diseases, but because of us sinners thou shalt be called merciful. For if thou hast a desire to have mercy upon us, thou shalt be called merciful, to us namely, that have no works of righteousness. For the just, which have many good works laid up with thee, shall out of their own deeds receive reward. For what is man, that thou shouldest take displeasure at him? Or what is a corruptible generation, that thou shouldest be so bitter toward it? For in truth there is no man among them that be born, but he hath dealt wickedly, and among the faithful there is none which hath not done amiss. For in this, O Lord, thy righteousness and thy goodness shall be declared, if thou be merciful unto them which have not the confidence of good works. Then answered he me and said, Some things hast thou spoken aright, and according unto thy words it shall be. For indeed I will not think on the disposition of them which have sinned before death, before judgment, before destruction. But I will rejoice over the disposition of the righteous, and will remember also their pilgrimage, and the salvation, and the reward that they shall have. Like as I have spoken now, so shall it come to pass. For as the husbandman soweth much seed upon the ground, and planteth many trees, and yet the thing that is sown good in his season cometh not up, neither doth all that is planted take root. Even so is it of them that are sown in the world. They shall not all be saved. I answered then and said, If I have found grace, let me speak. Like as the husbandman's seed perisheth, if it come not up, and receive not thy rain in due season, or if there come too much rain, and corrupt it. Even so perisheth man also, which is formed with thy hands, and is called thine own image, because thou art like unto him, for whose sake thou hast made all things, and likened him unto the husbandman's seed. Be not wroth with us, but spare thy people, and have mercy upon thine own inheritance, for thou art merciful unto thy creature. Then answered he me and said, Things present are for the present, and things to come for such as be to come. For thou comest far short, that thou shouldest be able to love my creature more than I. But I have oft times drawn nigh unto thee, and unto it, but never to the unrighteous. In this also thou art marvelous before the Most High, and that thou hast humbled thyself as it becometh thee, and hast not judged thyself worthy to be much glorified among the righteous. For many great miseries shall be done to them that in the latter time shall dwell in the world, because they have walked in great pride. But understand thou for thyself, and seek out glory for such as be like thee. For unto you is paradise opened, the tree of life is planted, the time to come is prepared. Plenteousness is made ready, a city is builded, and rest is allowed. Yea, perfect goodness and wisdom. The root of evil is sealed up from you, weakness and the moth is hid from you, and corruption is fled into hell to be forgotten. Sorrows are past, and in the end is showed the treasure of immortality. And therefore ask thou no more questions concerning the multitude of them that perish. For when they had taken liberty, they despised the Most High, thought scorn of his law, and forsook his ways. Moreover, they have trodden down his righteous, and said in their heart, There is no God, yea, and that knowing they must die. For as the things aforesaid shall receive you, so thirst and pain are prepared for them. For it was not his will that men should come to naught. But they which be created have defiled the name of him that made them, and were unthankful unto him which prepared life for them. And therefore is my judgment now at hand. These things have I not showed unto all men, but unto thee, and a few like thee. Then answered I and said, Behold, O Lord, now hast thou showed me the multitude of the wonders, which thou wilt begin to do in the last times. But at what time thou hast not showed me. The Acts of the Apostles, chapter 27, verses 1 through 20. And when it was determined that we should sail into Italy, they delivered Paul and certain other prisoners unto one named Julius, a centurion of Augustus's band. And entering into a ship of Adramyttium, we launched, meaning to sail by the coast of Asia, one Aristarchus, a Macedonian, of Thessalonica, being with us. And the next day we touched at Sidon, and Julius courteously entreated Paul, and gave him liberty to go unto his friends to refresh himself. And when we had launched from thence, we sailed under Cyprus, because the winds were contrary. And when we had sailed over the sea of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we came to Myra, a city of Lycia. And there the centurion found a ship of Alexandria sailing into Italy, and he put us therein. And when we had sailed slowly many days, and scarce were come over against Cnidus, the wind not suffering us, we sailed under Crete, over against Salmone. And hardly passing it, came unto a place which is called the Fair Havens, nigh whereunto was the city of Lasea. Now when much time was spent, and when sailing was now dangerous, because the fast was now already past, Paul admonished them, and said unto them, Sirs, I perceive that this voyage will be with hurt and much damage, not only of the landing and ship, but also of our lives. Nevertheless, the centurion believed the master and the owner of the ship more than those things which were spoken by Paul. And because the haven was not commodious to winter in, the more part advised to depart thence also, if by any means they might attain to Phoenice, and there to winter, which is a haven of Crete, and lieth toward the southwest and northwest. And when the south wind blew softly, supposing they had obtained their purpose, losing thence, they sailed close by Crete. But not long after there arose against it a tempestuous wind, called Euroclydon. And when the ship was caught, and could not bear up into the wind, we let her drive. And running under a certain island, which is called Clauda, we had much work to come by the boat, which, when they had taken up, they used helps, undergirding the ship, and fearing lest they should fall into the quicksand, strake sail, and so were driven. And we, being exceedingly tossed with a tempest, the next day they lighted the ship, and the third day we cast out with our own hands the tackling of the ship. And when neither sun nor stars in many days appeared, and no small tempest lay on us, all hope that we should be saved was then taken away.